boy, so it's out of the clamps, which is exciting. So this is the first time you get to hear it in a way, and then she's gonna be loud. You can, yeah. So there's the major casework done. Here's what we have to do next. I have to trim the edges because I always leave these long for a couple of reasons. One is to you never know exactly where this is going to line in sometimes. So I want to give myself just a little extra here. As I tell my students, it's easy to take away wood. It is very hard to add wood. Or easier to take away than add. I have to actually trim the points. I'll have to do the final profiling and edge work here. We have to obviously cut in our neck, and I have to cut in the saddle that sits right there. So that's what we have coming up here in the near future. But first I'm going to cut in the neck and profile that area, and then I can work the rest to match what I need to. So let's look at splicing in our neck right here. For the neck joint, I've cut away the edge, see right there, to start to fit the neck in, just to give myself a line of where I need to actually score, which I just did. And then I'll be able to cut through the ribs into that top blocking. So I'll sit here and cut this way. And usually before I cut, I'll do a knife wall. I'll show you what that is, guys. So I've scored that line. I'll take a chisel or something of the like and take off that little bit. It's called a knife wall. Make it with a knife, but it's made for sawing. And what it is it gives the your saw a place to slide into. Now, I don't even have to saw this. I can slowly take this down with a chisel if I wanted to chisel this all out. But I saw a hard line to work to. So this will give my saw a place to ride in and ride up against so that it doesn't drift out of that spot. Man, every time I cut this cedar, it's just so aromatic. Crazy. Okay. And I'm going to go all the way through that down to the purfling. So I'll do that on both sides and start chiseling it out. So now we're through the yellow cedar into the red cedar. I'm going to take off the rest of this spruce and then slowly trim that back. So that's, you'll start to see where our neck is going to slide right into there. Let's take a look at this. I have the neck joint cut, but it's not all the way to its proper depth. And that's what I want. I don't want this to sink in all the way yet. Just like dovetails, I don't want them to fit the first time. To make good dovetails, you don't want them to slam them in. You actually want them not to fit and then tailor them to fit. So I'll show you where it's at up here. So there's our joint, here's our neck. You'll hear it when it sinks in. Okay, so there's no glue, no nothing in there, and that'll hold just on the sides from friction. So there is the beginnings of our violin. All right, looks like one. It's gonna sound like one, but here's how much I have left. You can see that gap. So what I need to do is I need to actually sink this, open these sides up a little bit at a time until that gap is closed and seats up really nice and firm next to the button. All the while, I gotta keep an eye on the measurement here from the fingerboard projection to the top. So that creates the angle of the strings, the break angle over the bridge. And so what I want to do is I want to manage these two things at the same time. So I'm going to sink it in and make sure it's at the right angle to get the right measurement, which means that that gap may change shape, and I got to tailor the edge of the neck to fit that button. So lots of stuff going on. So not a lot of stuff to film in a way. So I'm just going to keep on chiseling and sanding those little sides until we fit up, we have the right projection, and then we'll check in on you. And then we get to glue that in, and then take the fingerboard off and do all the other fun stuff. All stuff to do. All right, exciting times. So here is the socket for the neck and the neck itself. Now these joints, once there's glue in there and it swells, they'll be even tighter. You can see that lovely western cedar in there. Now these are carved with some traditional tools. So I use a kiridashi, just like a Japanese carving knife. I use regular old western style chisels. I also use sanding sticks. So I put sandpaper mounted these sticks so I can level things out in those tight corners. But you can see, so this has no glue in it, no nothing in it. Just by friction fit, that joint will hold all the way to the violin. All right. So that is good to go. I'm making sure that it's mounted straight so it's not twisted and it's not sliding side to side. So once that's all good in place, I will heat up some glue and we will glue the neck in place permanently. Yeah, looking good. Okay, so let me glue this up, clamp it in place, and then we get to move on to some more fun bits. The saddle cutting, and some cleanup and edge cleanup, a lot of cleanup, and then once a lot of cleanup, I'm gonna break this fingerboard off and start the finish work on it. So exciting. It's out of the clamps for the neck. So the neck is now in there, unless some luthier in the future has to take it out. That's one of the most interesting things about violins to me versus a lot of other instruments, is that every single one of these components can come apart at some point if it's needed to. Because it's held with a traditional hide glue, you can use hot water, denatured alcohol, some things to actually remove any part of it. So if a rib breaks, there's a way to take it apart. If the top needs to come off, if the fingerboard, etc. pretty much all of it. So our next steps is right here at the button. You can see that it's still a block. I'm going to have to trim this to match the heel of the neck and do the final shaping on that. And I'm going to do the final shaping on the points and the edge work and everything else. But I think this is looking really, really sharp. I'm loving this kind of muted color palette on it. So anyhow, oh, one thing you get to see that'll be kind of fun is how the fingerboard is held on right now, because I need to take that off. Well, I'll leave it on for a second. I'm gonna leave it on while I do the heel just to look at it and do the final shaping here, and then I'll take it off. So we'll show you that in a second. All right, little change of heart. I'm gonna take the fingerboard off now, and I'll tune that up a little bit later. So it's just held in there with 2 pieces of masking tape with CA glue, which is like industrial super glue basically. And so you just have to crack that separation between the tape, like so. Come on. There we go. And there's our fingerboard off. So now I can get to the hard work of doing all the cleanup and profiling. I put the fingerboard back on just to make sure I have the neck tapered all correctly. I'll take it off just a little bit, but first I'm going to trim up this button and get it nice and flush before some final shaping. There's always a tough spot to get into. You can't really use power tools in here because you can hit everything else. It's a little high risk. And so you end up just carving it usually. Alright, the main part of the heel is now shaped. So I'm going to turn my attention to the inside of the top plate and back plate. And so what I'll start doing is putting a small bevel just with a knife, like so. I'm going to work that bevel all the way around. All the way around the top and the back, and then I'll actually start to file and sand the final profile on this edge. Forgive me, I'm sick today in the last couple days, so if I sniffle a bunch, that's why. Anyways, I'm going to work here quietly, and I'll just get all this stuff done and then check back in. We are getting close to putting the first coat of finish on this, which I'm super hyped about. All right, very exciting time. I've got everything scraped and final sanded where I need to sand, and we are ready for the first coat of oil, which is going to show us the true kind of color of these woods. So I use kind of a weird non-traditional oil in terms of instruments, and I get yelled at by some people, but it is a tried and true method for me. So what I use is I don't know, kind of a long funny story, which I can get into, I guess. But I was a little guy. I was in, let me think, 7th grade, and I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and there was a woodworker at a local crafts place there, and I saw colors in woods that I'd never seen before. I wasn't even a woodworker at the time, and I thought, that's amazing. What did you do to get these colors? And he said, oh, I don't use anything unnatural. I just use, and he gave me a recipe for a handmade or a shop-made Danish oil finish. And
I wrote it down for some reason and put it in a book, and I've used that recipe ever since. It's nothing fancy or special, but I do use it in instruments before doing any kind of shellac work or anything like that. It still allows the instrument to breathe. It's not like a varnish or anything. Okay, but here we go. Belabored the point. Here's our nice inlay. See what she looks like. How nice is that? All right, so I'm gonna sit here and get the rest of it oiled up. That's what our mountain ash is gonna look like. I'm really excited to see what our crabapple and our cedar is gonna look like. So let's take a second and see what those will look like. Let's see, here's our cedar. Yeah. And our crabapple. Ooh, that's a lovely color. That's almost like an aged cherry. Look at that. That's a winner right there. Oh, I love that contrast in the seabouts. Okay, let me oil this up. Ooh, one more thing we gotta see. Wait till you guys see the curl in this neck. It's gonna be fantastic. Check that out. All right. How nice is that? Now, I'll put a coat of oil on this whole thing and let it sit for a couple days to make sure it's all cured and set well. And then I'll actually start the French polishing process of shellac on here. Now, most people, they actually color everything with a varnish. So they'll color, they'll use different pigments inside their varnish to make the colors of the spruce change or the colors of the maple change to whatever they want. In this one, I really want the natural color of all these woods to come through, so we're not really going to use any of that. So this spruce that you normally see on an instrument is normally brown or reddish or whatever, but we're going to leave it all natural Sitka spruce, which I think is going to be beautiful. Now the other thing I'm checking for are these little details where if a little bit of that hide glue from where I glue the top and the bottom on, if that gets stuck in a corner, it prevents any of this oil from getting in there, and so you'd see this like really white pale spot. So I'm keeping an eye out for those, and if I need to, I can go back in and take that out. And if anybody's a woodworker out there and you make your own Danish oil, the recipe for this is just a third boiled linseed, a third tung oil, and a third turpentine, basically. But I don't use turpentine. I use a different thinner that evaporates faster because I primarily use this for the color. What it actually does is it pulls the tannins to the surface and hardens them. And so the color will come forward, but it's not changing the wood in any way. That's why I can varnish over it and stuff. This is what I do for a lot of furniture pieces and instruments, obviously. Finish up the oiling the scroll and then let this thing sit and cure. And while that's happening, I need to make a shoulder rest or a chin rest for this thing. But man, I could not be happier. I think this is looking great. There it is. All oiled up, color just popping. So, we'll let this cure and get moving. Got to do an in pin, all the setup, finish off the fingerboard and the nut and the saddle that goes here. So we still have quite a bit to do, but this is a big step in getting this project done. All right, exciting time. I'm going to start building the shellac on here for a body fill before the French polishing part really starts. So to lay out what's about to happen, I'm going to flood this surface, since it's now dry, with shellac, a 2-pound cut of shellac. And then slowly those shellac layers have more and more alcohol in them, and they become to polish, and you get thousands of little micro thin layers that build up a perfectly, beautifully gloss finish on here. That's easily repairable and still lets the wood breathe and sound correct. Man, I'm loving this yellow. When you guys see it in person, it's amazing. But I have to do the next scary thing for me, which is I need to drill a hole right here in the bottom. I never like this part, and I don't know why. Some people don't see the big deal. It just bothers me to pieces. So that is for the end pin, right, that we've talked about before. That's going to hold the tail gut, that pulls the tail piece, holds some things together. But it also allows me to put a stick in there, and that allows me to rotate this by hand when I do shellac layers, and it gives me something to push against versus the bottom of the instrument. So right now I'm going to do that and open it up with a reamer. The little reamer we'll talk about in depth a little bit later. It widens the hole to the taper of the end pin or to the pegs. That's how you also widen out the holes up here. So I got to drill a quick hole, fit it for my little leg peg, whatever I want to call it, my pirate peg. We'll call it a pirate peg, I guess. So that'll sit there so I can work on it. So we'll drill that hole, and then we can start putting some shellac on here. Now this is a natural blonde. I'm not gonna tone these things. I'm not gonna make them any color or anything weird, because I think the color is just gonna be beautiful and natural. So let's drill some holes. That stressful part is done, and now we can actually also see in there, which is so fun. Ooh, okay, nice. All right, cool. So I'll widen this out with my reamer. Now I don't want to go too deep. I want to get this right to where the end pin is going to start sitting in there and not go any deeper. If I go any deeper and that gets wallowed out in any way, I'm in a little bit of trouble. So there's some ways to fix it obviously, but I don't want to have to work down those alleys. So now that I have that just sitting there, that's going to fit nicely. I can use my stick here, and apparently I need to alter this one for that end pin. So I'll shave this down a little bit just till it fits, and we'll be good to go. Funny enough, I have a special little hole drilled right in my bench so I can pivot this around. But all we're going to do is put on a coat of this. Make sure we keep it nice and clean. Alright, so that's coat number one. After coat number one, we'll let this set up for a little while. It dries pretty fast, but I want it to be totally set before I do a couple of other light coats, and then do a light sanding to refine the surface if there's anything in there before we start actually doing the finish polish work on it. Alright, let's let it dry.